Well, hello, this is Investor Connect. My name is Hall Martin. Today I'm here with Doreen Lorenzo, the Assistant Dean for the School of Design and Creative Technologies at the University of Texas. Doreen, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do there at UT?
Hi, Hall. Thanks for having me. Yes, so this is a brand new school, and the school is in the College of Fine Arts at the University of Texas. And the school really is focusing on almost exactly what it says. It's really looking at the design industry and looking at design from many different lenses, not just the visual design, and also creative technologies. If we think about the creative economy being one of the fastest growing sectors in our world today, at the university level, we should be working with students to prepare them to go out and work in this industry. So not only are we teaching them the creative skills that they need, but we also are working with a whole entrepreneurial team to really teach them about, thinking about creativity beyond being a freelancer, right? Being very entrepreneurial in what they've done, thinking about the businesses and really how to solve problems in a way that creates something new and different.
Well, that's great. I think at your position there, you're in a good spot to spot new trends and new things coming up. I once did a research on the entrepreneur community in Austin, and I was surprised at how much the city draws from the university in the way of students, talent, expertise, research, etc. And so much comes out of there that I think you're probably in a key spot to see what's coming up. What are you seeing there at this point?
Well, it's interesting. I've been in this design and innovation space for many, many, many years, and I see it go through trends. And currently, there's definitely a swing into the physical, really looking at physical products. So it's everybody loves digital. It's easy to make something digital, but people are really having this hankering for something physical. And I'm not sure if it's the rise of things like Etsy or websites, something like that, or Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where people are making stuff, or it's just the fact that we do live in a three-dimensional world and there's stuff around us.
There is, and I think there's some applications where you really do have to have physical devices and connections to physical things in order to make them work. Like with IoT, for example, you're not going to get there all the way off of just pure software with a recurring revenue SaaS model. You will have to put in hardware and it will have to interact. But what other elements do you see out there for that?
Well, I do see that obviously the connection between software and hardware is blurring. It's becoming just something that people are definitely very comfortable with doing. We're also seeing really, the rise of what is this machine learning? What does that mean from an artificial intelligence standpoint? I think there's a lot of fear that's thrown out there about what it could be and what it could do. And personally, I like to concentrate on, what good can it do for us too, right? Because there's always, every time we introduce something new, there's always this fear-based. But then what good can it do for us? Because the reality is it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And I'd like to really put our energies towards, okay, what good can it do and how can it help people? And so we're certainly seeing a tremendous amount of movement in that area.
Well, the School of Design is a relatively newcomer to the university. What role does it play in the entrepreneur community in creating new businesses?
Well, as I said, I've been in this design and innovation space for a very, very long time. And what's interesting is I spent for probably the first 15 years trying to talk about really the fact that design added value to business, right? If you look at businesses that we admire, most often they had well-designed products and services or experiences. And the great thing is, probably in the last 8 years or so, we've seen that design, in fact, has arrived, which is great, right? Businesses put an enormous value on that. We're also, so for us at the School of Design and Creative Technologies, we really need to be teaching students what that means from a business value proposition and also what role they can play in that. Design had always been seen as something on the outside looking in, and the reality is it's right in the middle. And I think if I've learned anything, I've learned that we have somehow separated that designers or creative people, I will say this, can't be business leaders. And that's not true at all. And so we really want to give them some, here at the school, really give them some entrepreneurial background and abilities to go out and really explore that nature.
Well, as the cost of doing business continues to go down and the ease of starting a business goes up, it just makes sense that creatives can actually start their own businesses and focus on the actual business at hand, making customers happy with those products, as opposed to the extraneous things that come with running a business like accounting and so forth. So it seems like the business world has come to a place where it's enabling more people to start their business. But what do you see out there for creative starting business? What trends do you see coming up there?
Well, I think, again, if we know, so there's a couple of indices out there that we know, right? We know that Design Management Institute has tracked companies on the S&P, and those that had design-led organizations always fared better. We know that Forrester last year released a study. Now, the study was commissioned by Adobe, but again, design-led businesses did much better than traditional businesses. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that the concept of design, and I'm just not talking about a pretty picture or a pretty product, but I'm talking about the entirety of the experience. So anything from service design to visual to interaction to customer experience. When you design the system and the experience well as the product, you're going to produce, right, a happier customer, a more loyal customer, and a more loyal end user, which is going to actually then improve your business, right? If those are the goals, is we want to keep customer retention, we want to have lower calls to our service centers. All of that are design problems, and so when we start looking at design really being something that plays so heavily into how a business is constructed, designers really can begin to play a role there because they are looking at the whole system. They're not just looking at the parts of the system. And, a great design-led business that we've seen rise up, from the ashes is Airbnb. It was started by designers. And of course, that business that we all know, although Steve Jobs wasn't a designer, had a great eye for design and a great appreciation for design. And so, we have a lot of success stories around that tell us what design can do for a company.
So when students are going through the program, what values are they learning to apply this to? How do they apply it directly to business? And is, I guess, a more detailed question.
Sure. I mean, the values that they're interesting that you say that, right, is one of the number one values you have to learn is empathy. Because really, to be a great designer and to design a great product or service, you have to understand people at a really deep personal level, because if you understand what motivates that, and that's not, having sympathy for somebody, that's understanding what motivates somebody. And if you understand what motivates somebody, you then can create something that they want or they need. And so often what you see is businesses, I've seen this for 30 years, right? Businesses will insist that they know what their customers want because they've been in it for so long. And so I think from a design perspective, what we teach, teaching our students is really go out and ask the questions. And sometimes you're not going to get the answer you think you're going to get. And you have to be open to understanding what to do with that. And I think if I've seen anything in business, I see people rejecting that. It's like, well, that's not, I know what a customer wants. I hear that all the time. I know what the customer wants. I've been doing 30 years or 20 years. I know what they need. I've been in this industry. And so I think what we're certainly teaching our students is really, it's got to start with those insights.
And so what a customer wants evolves over time. Back in the 20 years ago, people just wanted a decent customer service experience. Now they want a complete product experience, and it continues to go up the curve. How do you identify what the customer wants?
Well, you identify, a customer is never going to tell you, oh, by the way, I want you to create a system where, you rent out your house to me. You're not going to hear that, right? What you're going to hear is, I just find hotels a total drag, and I wish I could, I travel all the time, and I can't often get to a phone, and I wish I could do a whole bunch of stuff from my mobile phone. And you begin then to get these insights to figure out, okay, what is the problem we're truly trying to solve? And that's when you understand insights, which is that part of empathy, you can understand then how to take those insights, begin to see the patterns, and then craft that into ideas that will hit to what the customer wants. Because most likely, when you explain something particularly new to someone, they're not going to say yes or no. It's very experiential. You'll never have to call a cab again. You can get on your phone and just, get someone, it'll show up in 5 minutes at your door.
Well, in a previous company, I actually worked on what we call lead user projects, where we would try to find specific users who were pushing the envelope, doing next generation work, and would give us some real world experience for how a certain product might be working or how they were trying to solve a current problem. What is your take on a lead user approach to designing a customer experience?
Well, I think lead user is one of these. In other words, getting feedback from somebody. But I think you've got to look at, depends on who your audience is and who this is intended for. But I think you've got to get information from different types of people to test your assumptions and see if that, in fact, is the direction you want to go in. Because sometimes, and I've seen this many, many times, sometimes you think that is, in fact, your target audience. And when you go out there and you talk to people, you find a whole other rich target audience if you just pivot your product, a bit. We think it's simple, like go talk to people. If I've seen anything, I've seen that being probably the number one thing that businesses don't do.
Well, one of the tenates of business I always put out to startups is sell it first and build it second. Most people are building it first and then struggling to sell it because they built the wrong thing or not the exact right thing and so forth. So it seems like in the selling process, you would start to understand what the customer experience is. If they're not buying it in the first place, we don't need to be building it in the second place and need to go back and reiterate on that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, when you're selling something, right? Obviously, it's a metaphor for, what are you offering? I think part of the whole process in design is prototyping things, because I also think the tangibility of something. If I described red to you or anybody in the audience right now, we would all have a different shade of red right now in our mind. Yours might be, blood red. Mine might be more go towards the purplish reds. And so the best thing you can do is begin to put something tangible into people's hands they can look, feel, touch, play with, experience. And that's going to give you the best feedback once you get those insights from people.
So that sounds fascinating. Where do you see the program going from here at the University of Texas? What's next on your plate there for growing that program?
It's new, so we're growing it. But look, I think the whole idea of this school is to be responsive to the needs of the world, right? So business, to nonprofits, to government. What are we seeing? How do we craft our curriculum to be a much more responsive curriculum? And so hence for me, it's been working with many, many, many business leaders around the country, really getting their input and really designing curriculum so that when the students graduate, they can easily assimilate into a business.
Well, and it seems like there's quite a few businesses people go through. There's for-profit, there's nonprofit, there's B Corps, there's many different aspects of this that go out there as well. What is your focus at this point?
It's what, it's really you're taking students and you're focusing them on what their interests are and helping them realize if they're creating something, where would it best fit? I think so many students start out in two places. One is interesting. They start out, wanting to go build the business, right? They're going to go build the next unicorn business. And then there's a whole bunch of other students that want to do social impact work. So you want to give all of them that ability, because sometimes you'll see them switch. The other area that they're all just starting to dabble in right now is this whole concept of, really getting into kind of government work. I just interviewed somebody for, one of my Fast Company articles who's a, chief innovation officer. There seems to be a whole bunch of chief creative officers. The city of Los Angeles is hiring a chief creative officer. So you're seeing this concept of design and innovation move now into, the government sector. So I also think we'll start to see a lot of people, moving into that area too.
It seems like one of the challenges you face is the fast-paced change of technology. I went to get my passport the other day, and I can tell you the world of technology has moved so fast away from what they're processing now. It seems like they have a ways to catch up. So how do you match design to the technology changes that go out there? Because things go on the computer, they go on the mobile, they go on the web, and we're always chasing that experience to make it better to interact with how the technology is working, and it's a moving target, it seems.
I think the first thing you have to do is not concentrate on technology, but what's the problem you're trying to solve. If you can identify the problem you're trying to solve, you're going to solve it with the technology that's available at that moment. And that's what you have to look at. I think so many people will come in and, I'll hear this. It's like, I have an app I want to develop. Well, is an app the best thing? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Let's figure out how then are we going to go solve that problem. Mm-hmm. And that's how you not get around, but that's how you deal with technology, because technology is always going to change. It's always going to evolve. I mean, Hall, you and I have seen, many, many years of technology changes. But the problems that we're trying to solve, well, those stay pretty consistent, right? So how are we going to solve those problems at that moment with what we have?
That's a good point. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate your taking time to share this information. What else would you like to say in closing that we haven't covered so far about the School of Design and the work you're doing there?
Well, I think this is a first of its kind in the country. So in many respects, this is your classic design problem, right? We're creating something that doesn't exist. We're creating something that's new, and it's a lot of fun. I encourage the community to get involved. It's a big public university, so we want community involvement as much as we can.
Well, you got a great resource there and a great team to pull that off, and it's certainly much needed as the world moves forward. It's demanding more in the way of design to solve its problems. So it sounds like you're in a key spot to see how it's coming together and driving that change. We appreciate you working on that.
Thanks, and thanks for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for coming on.
All right, take care.